Hi, I'm Paul Edwards. I'm an independently published horror author and first and foremost, a monster fan. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about Tarantula, the 1955 film starring Leo G. Carroll, Mara Corday, and perennial B-movie bad penny John Agar. And this video is a special request by Michael Detch 5511, one of my subscribers. So don't let it be said that I don't take requests, because I do. Tarantula was part of the giant bug craze of the 1950s, a craze that started with a really good monster film, Them, the previous year, 1954. Them was about giant ants that had spawned out in the desert as a result of nuclear tests from back when nuclear testing used to be done above ground out in the desert. And Them spawned a whole bunch of imitators and copycats. Probably the best among them was this film, Tarantula, from 1955, but this was certainly not the only one. 1957 especially was the banner year for giant bug movies. You had The Deadly Mantis, you had Beginning of the End, you had The Strange World of Planet X, sometimes called The Cosmic Monsters. You had The Black Scorpion, Earth versus the Spider. All of these films featured creepy crawlies that had been made gigantic, usually as a result of atomic power and leaked radiation. By the way, have you ever noticed that it's always a creepy crawly that's made gigantic by radiation? It's never, a bunny rabbit. It's always something hideous like a cockroach or a scorpion or a beetle. But be that as it may, in Tarantula, it actually was not atomic power that caused the mutation. There was a different origin for the monster. Leo G. Carroll played a scientist who was trying to solve the problem of world hunger by creating a growth formula which would enlarge food animals. Now, that sounds somewhat plausible. I mean, if he's working on a way to make a larger chicken or a larger cow or something, okay. But why would he use this growth formula on a tarantula? Okay, in our culture anyway, spiders are not food animals. Why would he bother experimenting to make a tarantula grow? Doesn't make any sense other than as a way to get us a giant tarantula in this movie. So, of course, the laboratory is ruined by a big fight that happens in the lab, and the glass breaks, and the tarantula, which is at this point about the size of a human being, crawls out the back door and off into the desert. And the next time we see the tarantula, it's much bigger than that. It's more like 50 feet long. John Agar plays a country doctor who is investigating mysterious deaths that have started to happen around town. And Mara Corday plays the new assistant to Leo G. Carroll's mad scientist, although she has no idea what the full extent of his experiments are, and she certainly has no idea that there's a giant monster on the loose. Now, Mara Corday, you have seen in a movie, even if you don't know it. If you've ever seen the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry movie, Sudden Impact, in the scene where Dirty Harry goes into the diner and the waitress pours too much sugar in his coffee for him, and when he comes back to complain, the waitress has done this on purpose so that he'll come back and complain and discover that the diner's been held hostage by a group of thugs. Well, that waitress is played by Mara Corday. So assuming you've seen Sudden Impact, you have seen her before. So, of course, the tarantula goes on a killing spree around the community. And at first it's, it's elusive and people have not caught sight of it. They've only seen the ruins of the people and animals that it has killed, and they're trying to solve the mystery of what has been doing this. And then, of course, eventually people do see the tarantula. They try to kill the tarantula with dynamite. That doesn't work. And so they call in the Air Force, and in comes a squadron of jet fighters armed with napalm, and they incinerate the tarantula just as it's about to lay siege to the town. Now, oddly enough, the actor who played the commander of those fighter pilots was Clint Eastwood in an early role. So there's actually two movies that have Mara Corday and Clint Eastwood both in them. So I think Tarantula is a great example of the differences between an American giant monster movie and a Japanese giant monster movie. And there are two big differences. Difference number one, generally the Japanese giant monsters called kaiju have distinctive personalities. If you know your Japanese giant monsters, think through who the main ones are. Godzilla, Mothra, Anguirus, Gamera for sure, King Ghidorah. Each of those monsters has a distinctive personality. And you'll notice, it was a slip of the tongue, but you'll notice I said, notice who the big ones are, not what the big ones are, because they have a personality. American giant monsters, other than King Kong, don't. They tend to be interchangeable, generic creatures like ants, tarantulas, locusts, grasshoppers, scorpions. And in some of these movies, the movie presents you with a whole bunch of them. Like in Beginning of the End, there's a whole bunch of them, giant insects. In Black Scorpion, there are a whole bunch of the giant scorpions until they cannibalize each other, and then there's only one really big one left. But none of them has a distinct personality. Each of them is just a generic creature of its kind, and is interchangeable with any other creature of its kind. So that's one big difference between Japanese and American giant monsters. The other difference, I think, is a lot more interesting, though. In American giant monster movies, there is no problem that cannot be solved by American military firepower. All those giant bug movies that I listed for you, almost all those giant bug movies I listed for you, military power is the solution to the problem. Bullets, bombs, rockets, missiles, flamethrowers, things like that solve the problem. Japanese giant monsters don't work that way. Japanese giant monsters generally are invulnerable to human technology and human efforts. No amount of bullets or bombs is going to stop Godzilla. Godzilla, the first Godzilla, was killed by a human invention, but it was a special scientific attack, an oxygen destroyer, and it was an invention that the inventor took the secret of to his grave. It wasn't any sort of conventional military force. Think of Rodan. They shot 1 million rockets at Rodan. Didn't hurt Rodan. What hurt Rodan was that the rocket set off a volcanic explosion, and the eruption, the molten lava, is what destroyed Rodan, the two Rodans in their original movie. King Ghidorah, absolutely invulnerable to any amount of missiles or rockets you can shoot at him. All these Japanese monsters, human efforts are ineffective against. The only thing that can really kill a Japanese giant monster is either a force of nature, like a volcanic explosion, or another giant monster. When you have one giant monster versus another, they can end up with a fatality because they're on an even playing field. But mankind is puny in the Japanese movies. And a great example of that, I think, is if you think of the 1933 King Kong. King Kong was destroyed by really a few machine gun bullets. I know, he fell off the Empire State Building. But the only reason he fell off the Empire State Building was that the machine gun bullets had weakened him and he couldn't stay conscious and he was on his way to dying anyway. So basically, he was killed by bullets. Godzilla, Rodan, King Ghidorah, they're not going to be killed by anything that human beings can do. They're playing on a whole different level. And if you look over my shoulder to the Famous Monsters of Filmland vintage magazine cover behind me, there's a great painting that I think captures the spirit of Japanese giant monsters very well. They're on a whole other level above us, and we are helpless at their feet. American monsters, giant monsters, like Tarantula, they just don't work that way. That's just not the way that Americans think. Americans have the attitude that we can solve our problems by the proper application of our technology, and in these cases, the technology is military force. So I think it's a really interesting difference. And now, if you want, keep it in mind the next time you watch a giant monster movie, and I bet you'll notice this difference, that the Japanese monsters simply have an invulnerability to human efforts that the American ones do not have. Now, when it comes to giant spiders, I have an entry in this world myself. My book, Mourner's Web. And this is an early entry in my Mourner's Woods book series, which is available on Amazon.com. In Mourner's Web, Dr. Kate Mangold wants to save the rare Jabba Fofi, legendary man-eating spiders of the Congolese jungle. She spends years capturing specimens to rescue from extinction. And what she plans to do is to release them here in North America to test their relocation to a new habitat. She's going to release them in Mourner's Woods. This is a shunned, isolated forest that's reputedly haunted and certainly dangerous, and nobody ever goes there. So this is a perfect place, she thinks, to set her giant spiders loose and see if they can breed and thrive in North America successfully. When the story begins, Dr. Kate Mangold is now returning to Mourner's Woods. She has hired a nature guide, Olivia Oblivious Tack, to guide her back into Mourner's Woods to inspect the results of her experiment. But Kate's experiment has worked too well. Giant Jabba Fofi spiders have conquered Mourner's Woods, depleted the native wildlife, and now devour anybody who dares to trespass into their domain. The issue in the book is, can Kate and Oblivious escape from the giant spiders of Mourner's Woods? Can Oblivious restore nature's equilibrium by exterminating these invasive monsters? Will Kate let her try? Or is Mourner's Woods doomed to die under one huge silken shroud to become Mourner's Web? Mourner's Web, like all Mourner's Woods books, is available on Amazon.com. It's available in ebook, in printed form, and in audiobook. Thanks for spending time with me talking about giant monsters, and I'll catch you next time that we're looking at monster movies and horror films of the past. Take care.